Jon Cooper Ourlads Guide to the NFL Draft. Thank you. I didn't wake you up from a nap, did I? I hope I didn't wake you up from a nap.
No.
Hey, we
could
just
use one, though.
well, I could too. Paul and I just had Eric Morris, the head coach at North Texas, who was at Washington State, who was at Incarnate Word, who's the one who discovered Cam Ward coming out of high school. What a story, really, John, this is, from a zero-star player who didn't even run the same offense that they ran at Incarnate Word that allowed him to put up huge numbers. And here he is going to be the number one pick in the draft. This, to me, is just, it makes it even a greater story about who he is and what he's done.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's stories like that all the time. You know, you've seen some great quarterbacks over the years, some great players over the years that were unheralded coming out of high school and just, walk-ons, that just became great players. And Cam Ward is just another one in a long line of players like that. Great stories, and that's what makes the game all the more exciting.
John, what are you kind of watching as things shift around these last 2 weeks before the draft? What's become interesting to you trend-wise?
Well, some of the things that we've thought for a while are coming to fruition. And again, we won't know until the draft actually happens. But, one of the things we said early on that we thought maybe from about 20 or 15 or 20 down to about 55 or 60, the value of these players wasn't much different. And it was a good value, not necessarily elite, top of the first round value, but good potential starters. And, I don't think we're going to be – I think we might be surprised in terms of how we rank players, but we shouldn't be, that maybe a guy that might show up on a board at number 50 gets taken in the first round. The value is that close, and it's just kind of the flavor of the day. What does the team need? What does the team want? What does the team like in a player? So that's what is kind of come to fruition for us, and we've seen it more and more. We're hearing it more and more, and we think it's going to be a tough draft to pick in terms of mock drafts.
I asked this question. I forgot exactly who it was, and I hope I haven't asked this one to you, John. But there are 32 first-round picks. How come it never seems like nobody? It seems like there are never 32 first-round grades. Have I asked you that before?
Well, I don't think so. But as far as 32 first-round grades, I think sometimes there are. I mean, the way we do it, and we change it. We go from year to year and we say, okay, this is how we tier these players. These guys are top of the line first round picks. These next 10 or 15 could be first, could be second. These next, then we go another 15. It could be first, could be second, and then it's second, third. And then later in the draft, it's 5 to 7. Even though we've got a grade that says they're a fourth or fifth round pick, for us, he could go in the fifth, he could go through the seventh, he could go late in the fourth. So it's just that's kind of the approach we take. So we tier them. For example, there's 5 linebackers that we think are in the first tier. And they're first to second round picks. Maybe one could be even a third, but they're the top 5 guys.
Speaking of linebackers, that's not a really deep position in the draft, especially at the top. I mean, think one, Jihad Campbell, he's the other one, but then there's some guys that are really intriguing in the middle, like Barrett Carter and Jack Kaiser, guys like that.
Yeah, the thing we look at with these guys, some of them are a little undersized. Mm-hmm. Some of them don't have great cover skills. I mean, what do you want? Do you want a Mike that's a downhill thumper? Do you want a great combination of the two? Those guys are really hard to find. A guy that's got great cover skills, he can play in space, and then can come downhill and take on interior linemen. And there's a lot of what we call smaller space guys that are really good in space. They've got some quickness on the move in terms of shedding blocks. But boy, if you get caught in line straight up with a guard, they're going to have trouble. A lot of guys like that. They're coming out every year. And some of those guys in the middle that we think are good players that can do a lot of things really well. Barrett Carter is an undersized guy at just over 6 feet tall, 232 pounds. He's gotten a little bigger over time. Chris Paul Jr., we think, is a tremendously skilled linebacker who weighed in at 222, and he's only just over 6 feet. Bassa from Oregon is a nice player, 6'1", 232, that can get downhill. He can take on blocks, but he can get caught up inside sometimes. But boy, can he chase. Mondon from Georgia, former defensive back. These are some of these middle guys you're talking about. Is a nice player. Our top four, Knight, Walker, Campbell, Schlesinger. I'm thinking more about that Campbell should be a Sam linebacker, but I think he's a little undersized. I don't think he's necessarily really instinctive as an off-the-ball linebacker, but he's a tremendous athlete that can make plays. And it's going to be interesting to see what his weight shows up as, what his wingspan, all those kinds of things at his pro day. He hadn't run yet, so there's a lot of ifs with him as far as I'm concerned. Jihad Campbell, he's a thumper, but he's got some upside with cover skills, and he might be the first-round pick. Guy we like is Demetrius Knight from South Carolina. We think he's a really good combination of the two, a thumper and a guy that has coverage potential. And we think he could be a good player, and somebody might look at him and say, hey, we're going to take this kid in the first round or early in the second. We're going to make something out of him. He's got talent.
John, how many linebackers now, with the way the game is played, are everyday linebackers coming out of college? I know there's probably a lot of names, but how many of them that are pretty much going to be a part of that weekend of the draft?
I think I wouldn't, putting a number on it. I think it's hard for me to, actually do that. I think we got draftable grades on about 25 guys. Probably not all will get drafted. And some of them have those skills. Some of the down the line guys are really good space guys that can play in the nickel and are probably going to be great special team players. They're going to be backups. At the top of the draft, you've got, guys I mentioned, Knight, Walker, Campbell, Schlesinger. Chris Paul Jr. is kind of our sleeper, who's a little bit undersized. We love him in terms of everything he does, but functional strength is probably going to be an issue for him as an every down starter. But yet, as a will, you play him as a stack linebacker. We think he has 3-down potential. Same thing with Carter. Stutzman's a bigger guy, but there's some holes in his game, but he's got 3-down potential. So does Bassa. After that, and Mondon Jr. from Georgia. But again, he's undersized, so he might not be. But I'd say the first 9 or 10 guys all have potential to be 3-down players. Now, whether they are remains to be seen.
John, what do you think of Noel Williams, the cornerback from California? Led the country in interceptions this year. He's not going to be picked high like Will Johnson or maybe Azaria Thomas or some of those guys, but he seems to be, because of the production he had, creating turnovers, to be intriguing to me.
Well, he's a good player. I'm trying to think. We've got him probably, a little bit down the line from there. From the top. I think he's like maybe 15 or something like that. He's got good length. He's got balls for sure. He's got ball skills, and he's got decent speed. He does a lot of things well, and there's a lot of corners in this draft, so he can get lost in the shuffle. But he's a mid-round, second day potential, possibly a third day pick. It's going to be interesting to see where he goes. And there's another corner. Harris is another one from there. We've got a solid third round grade on him. So we think that's where he fits. He's 199 pounds. He runs a 4.5 40. He's not a burner. He's good ball skills. He's not the toughest guy in terms of that, but he's got a chance to be a good player.
John, set us up now. A couple of weeks away. Everything pretty much is done as far as testing and all that stuff. Sure, there are visits, whatever else. What is now in the big room or the draft war room at every franchise? Is there just a huge board? What do they have, and when do they start to put that thing up and finalize it?
Well, I think most of the teams and guys that I've talked to that were with teams are telling me that their board is set from the scouts' perspective. They're working with the coaches now to try, some of the teams anyway, some of the guys I've talked to, they're working with the coaches now, and they're having coaches watch film on specific guys. They're doing the tier thing that I'm talking about. They may say, hey, there's some guys we might like to take in this round that are edge players. So they'll have their defensive line coach or edge or defensive end, linebacker, outside linebacker, defender, whatever their terms they use, look at 5 guys and say, these are guys we could consider drafting. And so just tell me what your opinion are. So they're just trying to solidify from the coaching staff what they think of these guys. And then the next week, they start to reset their board. I mean, it's set, but they have to reset it. If a coach or something comes up on the security report that says, this guy's a bad actor, this guy's got some baggage that we can't have him on our board, or we got to drop him down, we're not going to take him in the first round anymore for sure because of this. So that's going to always be that resetting, readjusting, and the coaches now play a part. Does this player fit the system? Is he a kid you can coach? Let's say it's an outside linebacker. Does he fit? You want coverage out of your Sam? Can he cover enough to meet your expectations? Is he physical enough? Can he rush the passer? And I know, for example, one team I talked to said they targeted edge rusher in the 5th round. This was a few years ago, and they had 5 names that they would take in the 5th round, and they did it the same thing with corner. These are 5 corners we'd take, and then if those 5 corners aren't there, then it's the next position, and so that's kind of they're kind of setting that up. They're doing mock drafts. Not so much the mock draft. Some teams do a straight mock draft. Some teams, do it in tiers, and they say these are 5 guys we take. These are 5 guys we think the team ahead of us might take, and the team behind us might take. And then there's potential for trades. If we don't like what we're seeing about who's going to be there at pick number 76 in the 3rd round, we got to start thinking about trading up or trading down.
If someone's moving their lips talking right now, are they lying?
Well, a friend of mine who was, someone well, and a great friend, a guy I knew very well, Bill Tobin, once told me at this time of year, read and listen to everything you hear and believe half of it. So,
yeah.
I think that's for what it's worth.
Listen to all of it, believe half of it.
There you go.
Like
there you go. How much more can you learn between now and the draft with what you do?
Not much. I'll tell you what, though, there's a lot of second guessing that goes on. For me, I'm sitting there saying, I'm looking at this player, I'm reading my report, and I say, oh my gosh, I can't believe after I wrote that report, I've got him that low. So, and then I look at the guy that's ahead of him. So there's a lot of second guessing that goes on. That's why the tier system works a little better. If you have 5 guys that are similar value, and you may rank them 1 through 5, but you don't necessarily have to. Then it becomes flavor of the day, like those linebackers I was telling you about. I kind of go back and forth on those 5 guys as to where they fit, and I have gone back and forth. And we've got in our guide where we have them now, but it's pretty close for some of those, at least for 3 or 4 of them. And we wouldn't be surprised if number 4 goes number 1 of that group in the draft, and it wouldn't bother us that much either.
Would any teams in the NFL, and John, thanks for your time again. We appreciate it. Ourlads Guide to the NFL Draft, ourlads.com. Will teams fly somebody in, whether it's the first round or whatever, especially because that's where you're so much unknown, even though it does appear what Ward locked in at Tennessee. Will they do any, mind games with bringing players in just to send a message or screw with somebody else that has a pick in front of or behind them?
Well, I imagine some of that goes on. I know people have put things out there, with some of the pundits, hoping that somebody will pick up on it and maybe try to trade up or something like that. I'm sure that's happened. I know that's happened. How much of that, I couldn't tell you. But as far as bringing guys in, when they bring somebody in, that top 30, and, they don't necessarily mean top 30 guys. It means the 30 guys that they would consider drafting, and it could be in the 3rd, 4th round.
Right.
They're going to bring in guys that they sincerely think they could draft. I mean, I was just talking to a guy, the other night, coach that, and he told me that, they've given him certain names to look at, and he asked me about some guys, and I said, well, there's a guy I really like, and they didn't give him to us because they don't think he's going to be there when we want to pick a guy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably why he wasn't given to me, and so that's, and he mentioned a couple guys that they had brought in. And, they were guys that were mid-rounders, but they were guys that they liked, and they were probably potentially targeting at that spot.
Was there ever a player that you liked that not many others liked, and you knew you were right, and they didn't listen to you?
Oh, yeah, it happens. I can give you a lot of examples. I can also give you examples of when I thought I was right and I was dead wrong. So, I mean, I'm not going to pretend that I know I'm the definite expert, but there's been a couple of guys recently that I really liked I had third-round grades on both of them, and they were free agents. They were signed as free agents, and they became very good players. Keaton Mitchell was one from East Carolina, a running back. I loved watching him play, and I obviously got hurt, but he really set the world on fire for a while with the Ravens in 23 before he hurt his ACL. And then the other is Ivan Pace Jr., the linebacker that the Vikings signed as a free agent. And he was undersized. He was one of those under 6 foot tall guys. But he had been the player of the year in 2 conferences, in the MAC conference and the ACC, at different schools at Cincinnati and I forget what, Miami, Ohio, or one of those MAC schools. And, I watched him play, and I had a former player of mine that I had coached who was coaching. He actually coached at Ball State against him and East Carolina against him. And he told me, Coach, I'm telling you, this kid is great. You got to watch tape on this kid. We couldn't handle him. And I did. And I said, oh, my gosh. And, he nobody drafted him. It was a shock to me. And he was almost, he was an all-rookie team as a first-year player.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it, buddy. Appreciate it always. Jon Cooper, Ourlads Guide to the NFL Draft.